that's an issue as well. That we're seeing lead and mercury and things that are used in computer components. So we're looking at that. We can add that to the list to be looked at.
Okay. Thank you.
One last question, if I may. All right, come on.
Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
I'm an attendant, and if I have an issue with the supervisor, how would I go about addressing that?
They would go up their chain of command. They would then talk to the superintendent of public works, and then if there's no satisfaction, they would then go to the director. If no satisfaction there, they either go to human resources or to the assistant county administrator.
Okay. All right. So is there something in writing that would allow the attendant to know the process by which they should address that concern?
There's nothing in here. The employee personnel manual, I think, touches on, just talk to your supervisor and then the person above them. But we could definitely add an organizational chart into this without any issues to make sure that, that's seen so that they can have that.
Yeah. Just so they know if they
Absolutely.
have an issue, the steps that they would need to take to address it.
So we'll add an organizational chart into here and just kind of outline that procedure.
I probably will.
One last,
Go ahead.
is there any way, and not now, but is there any way that once a year or twice a year the other counties are doing it, they're taking in chemicals that aren't used, paints, those kinds of things? Is there anything we can do? And I don't know what the cost is, and you don't have to answer it tonight or put it in the book, but I've had a number of people ask me they've got stuff sitting in their garage, in their shed, in their basement that they want to get rid of. They can't really throw in a dump. I mean, I guess they could,
Right.
but they've been reluctant to throw in the dumpster.
We actually used to do the program twice a year, and it's been cut out due to financial situation. It runs between $20,000 and $30,000 to do twice a year, and the last 3 years we haven't done it because of financial reasons. So it really was 2008, I believe, was the last year that we did that.
Answers my question. Thank you.
Sorry.
Other questions? All right, Mr. Shebel, why don't you go ahead and make the changes that have been recommended tonight and bring it back to the board one last time, the first meeting in March.
Okay. Would you like that on a consent? or
First
to
meeting,
read?
I'm sorry, last meeting in March.
Would you like that on consent or just then if it wants to be pulled, it can?
And it's not, and we don't have another meeting in March, so it'll be the first meeting in April.
27th.
That's right, 22nd. I'm sorry.
Redline whatever changes are.
Yeah.
On consent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You just redline it, put it on consent?
Yes, sir.
If you just redline the changes that you add and then put it on consent, it'll make it a lot easier.
Yep, we can do that.
Okay? All right. Board's going to take a 10-minute recess before we have the presentation of the county administrator's proposed budget.
So, I'm already.
As a meeting, the next item on the agenda is the presentation of county administrator's proposed budget, fiscal year 2012-2013. Mr. Pardon?
Mr. Chairman,
The floor is yours.
members of the board, this is my maiden voyage here, so bear with me, and the seas are probably a little choppy, so we'll do the best we can.
Okay.
It's no secret, as we've said all along, that FY13 is going to be a very challenging year for the county. We face some significant challenges in developing the budget. These challenges can be, they're primarily shaped by 4 factors. We are facing increased debt service for previously improved capital projects from the previous years. We're facing increases in VRS costs, health insurance, and state shared programs. The impact of the prolonged housing slump is having a negative effect on our utilities fund. And finally, we're facing flat or declining revenues. To go into more detail about each of these factors, since 2005, the county has invested approximately $59 million in capital projects for schools and general government. Now, these investments have provided a lot of needed infrastructure improvements. They've had a quality of service impact on the services that we provide citizens. And this is a by no means exhaustive list, but it is an example of what some of the investment has bought. You see $22 million for the new Lewis and Clark Elementary School, $9 million for the project to consolidate the primary and elementary school in Bowling Green into one school, $1.38 million for upgrades to Caroline Middle School, previous primary and elementary school renovations, school-wide technology improvements. We've invested about a little less than $5 million in public safety vehicles and equipment, and the new administrative offices in Bowling Green that have consolidated the county administrator's office, the treasurer's office, the commissioner of the revenue, and the registrar under one roof. Now, during this same period of time, we've invested about $31 million in utility-related projects. And these investments have provided additional water and sewer capacity that have helped accommodate growth in both residential and business. We've connected over 180 households in the Dawn area to a reliable means of wastewater disposal for the first time. And approximately 30 of those homes lacked indoor plumbing before the project. And perhaps most importantly, the investments in utilities have enabled the county to continue to compete in the critical economic development arena and provide the jobs and tax revenue that goes along with that. Of course, when you increase investment, increased cost goes along with that. And as a result, we're seeing a significant spike in debt service in FY13 for existing projects from the current fiscal year. That spike is a little over $2 million when you add up school, general government, and utility borrowing, which is roughly the equivalent of 7.5 cents on the real estate tax rate. At the same time, many of our other costs are rising. And some examples here, and there are others, but I wanted to hit the highlights. The cost to provide VRS retirement and group life insurance to employees is expected to increase by over $330,000 next year. That's based on the governor's proposed budget. There's some hope that that will change favorably, but we don't know that at this point. The county share of the cost for health insurance, which employees also pay a percentage of, but just the county share, as we made you aware a few meetings ago, is expected to increase by about $212,000 next year. The county's portion of the Comprehensive Services Act, which is becoming ever more expensive, that is a program that provides services for at-risk youth and families. It's shared by the state and the local governments, and the county share is expected to increase next year by just under $174,000. As I mentioned, the sustained slump in housing has really had a negative impact on the utilities fund, as you would imagine. It has prevented it from being self-supporting, which is the goal. Revenues from users do support operating costs, and we are proposing a 5% increase in user fees next fiscal year. This is the third year in a row for the 5% increase, a cumulative total of 15% over the last 3 years. However, the availability fees from new connections that are not on pace with what we expected are simply not sufficient to cover debt service. And as a result, about a $1.4 million, 1.3 I think next year, but $1.4 million general fund transfer is needed both in the current fiscal year and projected for FY13 to balance the utilities fund. At the same time, overall county revenues are expected to remain flat or even decline from the current year. Real estate taxes are projected to decline by about $36,000 at the current rate. That is primarily due to exemptions that have been put in place for veterans. Personal property revenue is expected to decline by about $340,000 at the current rate. A lot of that has to do with declining assessed value. And other revenues are mostly down. There are a few bright spots there. One exception is the local sales tax, which is expected to increase by about $110,000, $111,000, and public service taxes, which is expected to increase by about $24,000. Now, in developing this budget, we've attempted to hold the line on spending or even reduce it as much as possible while trying to avoid employee layoffs to the fullest extent possible. We've taken many personnel-related cost-cutting measures in previous years. You may recall since FY 2009, 12 full-time positions have been eliminated, and one position was reduced from full-time to part-time. We've also furloughed employees 7 days without pay in FY 2009 and 2010. We implemented 1 or 2% pay cuts in July 2010 and restored them in September 11. Those cuts were partially, or in some cases entirely, offset by one-time bonuses, but they were not completely restored until September of last year. This budget proposes no cost of living or merit pay increases for the 4th consecutive year. It does keep restored pay in place from prior cuts. The restored pay has not been, the budget in the current fiscal year has not been adjusted yet to reflect that. So it appears there's an increase in FY13 in personnel costs, although there are no pay increases, simply restoring the previous cuts. No new positions are proposed with the exception of a wastewater treatment plant operator that we will hire midway through the fiscal year. That is mandated by the plant expansion. Finally, the budget does not fund the 5 full-time firefighter or medic positions, which we hired through SAFER grant funding when that expires in September 2012. We've also eliminated or reduced funding for capital projects approved in the current fiscal year. And the list there includes, and I should say, these projects have been deferred. They were approved, but we've not borrowed the money yet. We've not begun them. And in an effort to reduce debt service costs, we've elected to defer them in the FY13 budget. You see the list there: Carolina High School HVAC replacement. Public safety radio system has been reduced from $12.1 to $6 million. We've deferred the Lady Smith Solid Waste expansion site, the Sparta Volunteer Fire Station replacement, the new Carmel Church Fire Station, the equipment that would be needed there, GIS upgrades, and the van for the Department of Parks and Recreation. The budget also limits new capital projects in FY13 to the absolute bare minimum. It does honor the commitment for the $1.5 in additional money for the Bowling Green Pre-K 5 school that the board previously approved. And again, it includes $6 million for the radio system upgrade that's mandated by the FCC. We've also attempted to hold operating budgets to flat or reduce fundings with few exceptions. We've held the local appropriation for schools flat at the current year's $11,566,270. We are proposing a modest increase in economic development efforts, which is the key to generating additional jobs and revenue. We've doubled the economic development advertising line item, and even with doubling it, it's only at $40,000. And we're also proposing to fully fund the county's contribution to the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance. We've underfunded them in recent years, and we really need to fully fund them this year to support that very key economic development tool. The fund balance, we do propose the use of $1 million of the fund balance to balance the FY13 budget. We have a projected fund balance of $1.9 at the end of the current fiscal year after the $1 million transfer to the utilities fund. That's how we arrived at that number. We started the year at $3.3 million. the fund balance would be lowered to $900,000 at the end of next fiscal year without any increase in revenue. Bottom line is that revenue at existing tax rates is not sufficient to cover our costs because of the increases that I just mentioned, despite our efforts to reduce spending. As a result of that, the budget proposes a 4-cent real estate tax increase. This will take us to 72 cents per $100 of assessed value, which would generate about $550,000 in the current fiscal year because it would first be effective with the June payments, which hit at the end of the current fiscal year. And then in the full fiscal year in FY13, you see a $1.1 million revenue increase. The homeowner with an average house valued at $160,000 would pay about $64 more per year based on the proposal. This slide here gives you an idea of where Caroline would rank in 2011 with a 72-cent real estate tax increase. I don't have the information for 2012 yet. It's been proposed but not adopted, and so this is the most current information that we have. The budget also proposes an increase in the personal property tax rate to $3.50 per $100 assessed value, again at 100% NADA value, which the board just approved. That would generate an additional $413,000 in revenue in the current fiscal year and $826,000 in FY13. The citizen with an average valued car, which is about $7,900, would see a just under $30 increase, and the citizen with an average valued truck would see an increase of just under $33 per year. This slide gives you an idea of where Caroline ranks with I think it's 16 other comparable counties or counties that are neighbors of ours. Taking a look at the projected fund balance and where we end up with the recommended tax increases, they're there to help build the fund balance going into FY13 and beyond. As I indicated before, your projected fund balance without the proposed tax increases goes down to $900,000, and with the increases, you see that it jumps to $1.8 million. There are some key initiatives or budget issues that the proposed budget does not fund that I feel compelled to bring to your attention. One is the 5 SAFER grant funded positions. I don't recommend that, frankly. I believe it will have a seriously negative impact on our ability to provide services. The funding constraints simply did not allow me to put it in, but I certainly don't recommend that. I don't recommend deferring the high school HVAC replacement project. I think that is an important project to move forward with. We have no replacement school buses or sheriff's vehicles. I believe that a comprehensive services act coordinator is necessary. Many localities the size of Caroline have a full-time person to coordinate CSA spending. As you can tell, the spending on that seems to ever increase, and the state is scrutinizing spending more carefully as their dollars increase as well. And again, this is the 4th year in a row with no merit pay or COLA increases for employees, and employees continue to lose track as their cost for health insurance goes up. So the total budget proposed for FY13 for all funds is just under $87 million, just under $51 million less than FY12. One point to remember is that the FY12 budget did include about $43 million in capital projects, as I indicated, many of which will be deferred. Next slide, the pie chart rather underneath is hard to see, but it gives you an idea of where our money comes from, with the majority coming from the state government as well as property taxes, as you would expect. This slide breaks down expenditures by all funds, and as you can see, we're investing the most in education at 47%. We're investing about 13% in public safety, and the other factors are there as well. This breaks down the expenditures by categories in terms of personnel and operating costs and debt service. As you'd expect, personnel is the overwhelming percentage.
Can you go back a slide?
Yes, sir. So to summarize the proposal, the total budget is just under $87 million. Proposes a real estate tax rate of 72 cents, or a 4-cent increase from the current rate. Proposes a personal property tax rate of $3.50. County appropriation is level funding for the schools. It uses $1 million of the fund balance, leaving a projected year-end fund balance again with the tax increases of over $1.8 million. We're adding one new position, again, that's mandated halfway through the fiscal year with the wastewater treatment plant operator. We're investing in economic development modestly, and we're deferring funding for several capital projects that were included in this year's budget and approved. We're holding FY13 capital projects to the absolute minimum. Budget contains no employee pay increases. And for perspective, 1 penny on the real estate generates $266,000, which is really about $245,000 after the various reductions are incorporated. Thank everyone that helped prepare the budget, all the department heads, constitutional officers for their cooperation. I want to extend a special thank you to Fran Hatcher and Mike Fincham for their help in preparing it. And staff looks forward to the work sessions and the dialogue with the board. Be happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions of Mr. Pardon on the proposed budget at this point?
Chair.
Mr. Black?
Mr. Pardon, on the 5 Safer Grant firefighter positions, we are renewing our application for that grant, correct?
That's correct.
When will we find out our success or failure on that?
Mr. Garnett, can you help me with that? I know it's been submitted. May and August is the response, we should know. Between May and August.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Pardon?
I don't have any at this time.
You ready, Ray? No. Mr. Parton, on your, I think it's slide 14 from here, we have a $1 million undesignated fund balance that we're going to, or $1 million of our undesignated fund balance you wish to use for the current fiscal year to help balance it.
In FY13.
In FY, so
Yes, sir.
1.4 of the current.
1.4 is what's left over.
Well, no, we started with 3.3.
3.3, 1.4
We used
for the utility fund.
This current year to balance, and it left us with 1.9. He's wanting to use $1 million of
Right.
the 1.9 million.
Right.
So it leaves us $900,000 out, if nothing, at the end of next year.
Right, and that's kind of what I just want to make sure was clear. 1.9 is what we have now. You want to use $1 million of that 1.9. If we didn't use that $1 million, you would have to have another 4-cent increase to make up that extra $1 million. That sound right? Okay. Or more cuts, if we looked at it that way. So you want to end up at the end of the fiscal year 13 with, I lost it, 1.8 as the undesignated fund balance?
Yes, sir. 1,863,000.
If there's a tax increase.
Correct.
Okay, so if there's not a tax increase,
900,000 is where you
we'd
did.
have 900,000 left, plus you'd still use that $1 million
Correct.
for this year. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions of Mr. Pardon?
Mr. Pardon?
Yes, sir.
I got a question on that slide that Mr. Thomas said you go back to. I guess it's slide number 22. When it says 47% of the budget goes towards education on that pie chart,
Yes.
does that include state funds as well? I mean, we included the state fund. I mean, from the does that include
Yes.
state funds? Yes. So
That's
that is
correct.
state as well as, and most of the money from the schools, more money from the state than locality. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Pardon, in that same vein, public safety, is that just local funds or is that state funds also included?
That would be state funds as well, yes. State funds as well as local funds.
Well, then I have a question based on the audit report that we got that shows that the school funds so the school funds, then the sheriff's funds that we have in our audit report contain state funds in it and just the local funds for the county in the audit reports.
I'm going to ask Ms. Hatcher to help me out with that.
I'm just trying to compare everything evenly.
This budget, because you all have to adopt a budget that includes the school's total budget, is not the same as what you see in the CAFR, because the schools are a separate entity and their funds are not commingled in the CAFR with county funds. They're recorded as a component unit, not included. For budget purposes, we are required by law to include the school's entire budget as part of our budget, but not in the CAFR.
So what percentage would education be if we took out state and local funds of the county budget? Or state and federal funds?
I can get that, break it down for you.
That's fine. I'm just, because we're not comparing things evenly in this, and that's all I want to be able to do is make an even comparison.
Okay. It's broken down in your detailed budget, and I can give you the percentages from that. But
You can just give me the pages for that to make sure I'm looking at the right things. That'd be fine. How's that?
That's fine.
Okay.
Let me see if I understand what you asked for, Mr. Seeley, is the fact that when we talk about the, you're talking about the pie chart as well, right?
Right.
The 47% that we say is going to education, and the 13% or 9% or whatever it was going toward public safety. Now, of that, what are you asking for to compare?
What we're
because
saying
it all
is
includes state and federal, state and local funds in those comparisons.
That's correct.
The sheriff as well as the education are included. State and local funds are included and federal.
what I want to do is compare the local fund for both.
Oh, so you want the local funds for all of the departments then?
Exactly. And let's get rid of the
What
state
category?
and federal stuff so that we're looking at what the local, because that's the only thing we have any control over is the local amounts.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from.
We can pull that together.
I'm sorry?
We can get that information for you.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
It's in your budget, I believe. If you in your detailed under the general fund, it'll give you a percentage of what's the education part.
And I guess my other confusion is when we talk about public safety and some of this, that's sheriff, fire and rescue, everything together.
That's correct.
And what I'd like to know is how those are broken out. All of public safety, sheriff's office, and I see it in pieces in the budget, and there's some things I can find and some things I can't. I'd just like to know what, when we say sheriff's office, what those budgets are, all of them for sheriff. Fire and rescue, and I saw the different volunteer fire departments and staff. I'm not sure I understand all the sheriff stuff because there's so many different budgets. And they're not all on the same page, and I can't find them all together. I'll call you, but I want to see the local for all of that.
But if we go with local, I think that we need to also include operations and capital. Because when you talk about local dollars as far as capital is concerned, that's all local.
Oh, no, I'm talking about just
Operations, what you were talking
operations.
about. Right, but what I'm saying is I think that in order to compare evenly as to where the money is being spent in the county, you have to include the construction as well, the capital as well.
I know what you mean by capital as well.
Well, because let's talk about sheriff's department versus school education.
Okay.
Now, operations, yes, that may be a little larger percentage in, and I don't know, in the sheriff's than it is in schools. I don't know that it would work out that way. I don't know. But certainly when you look at capital projects, which is local dollars as well.
Yeah, but there's a capital line.
I'm sorry?
There's a capital line that we're paying capital for that.
But that is all local dollars. I'm saying you look at all of it is part of the total budget. The
Okay.
capital budget is part of the total budget. You know what I'm saying? You don't
The
get it.
you know-
What I'm saying is we want to look at where the dollars is being spent. The local dollars are being spent. You have to include your capital as well as your operational if you want to see where where all of your local dollars are being spent. It may be higher in education or in public safety when it comes to operational, but it's going to be much higher when it comes to education.
But that should show up in the line item budget, shouldn't it?
Yes,
It's
sir,
not
it
going to show
does.
the percentages. The pie chart is not.
No, I'm looking for the budgets then. My next step was I want to see what we do locally for the line item budgets. And Ms. Hatcher just told me we're going to talk about what pages that's on to see if that solves, but I want to know what the local,
Well, there is a summary for public safety. I would have to sit down and break it out by the different departments. But what I did in the budget, there is a budget summary for each of the major categories that we've brought the budget so it compares to the CAFR as far as how they classify things. So under public safety, you have the sheriff, you have fire and rescue, you have building inspections, 911, and animal control. There is a summary of that has the local, state, federal, but it's in total. I'd have to break it down farther for what you're asking, which isn't that hard to do.
okay.
But there is a summary based on the major components that match to the CAFR, such as judicial administration, public safety, public works, community development, parks, recreation, and culture, and general